In 1888, the streets of London were gripped by fear. A mysterious killer known as Jack the Ripper brutally murdered several victims and then vanished without a trace. Who was he, and how did he escape justice?
In the late 19th century, London stood at the center of a vast global empire. It was the largest city in the world, a place of enormous wealth, industrial growth, and cultural influence. Massive factories, busy ports, and expanding railways symbolized the power of the British Empire. However, behind this image of prosperity existed a darker and far less glamorous reality. In the eastern part of the city lay Whitechapel, one of the poorest and most overcrowded neighborhoods in London. Thousands of immigrants, laborers, and unemployed citizens lived in cramped buildings and cheap lodging houses. Entire families sometimes shared a single small room. Poverty, disease, alcoholism, and crime were constant parts of daily life. For many women, survival was extremely difficult. Jobs were scarce, wages were low, and social support was minimal. As a result, many women turned to prostitution as a desperate way to earn enough money for food or a place to sleep. The streets of Whitechapel were especially dangerous at night, when dim gas lamps barely illuminated narrow alleys and crowded markets. Police patrols were limited, and violence was common. It was in this harsh and chaotic environment that one of the most terrifying criminal mysteries in history would begin. In 1888, a brutal series of murders shocked the population of London. Soon, newspapers would give the unknown killer a name that the world would never forget: Jack the Ripper.
The first widely recognized victim of the mysterious killer was Mary Ann Nichols, often called Polly. She was 43 years old and had lived a difficult life, marked by poverty, separation from her husband, and struggles with alcohol. Like many women in Whitechapel, Nichols survived by doing occasional work, and sometimes prostitution, in order to afford a bed in a lodging house. On the night of August 30, 1888, Nichols had been walking through the streets of Whitechapel after being unable to pay for a room. Lodging houses in the area required a small nightly fee, and without it, many people were forced to sleep outside. Witnesses later reported that Nichols had been searching for money so she could return and secure a place to sleep. In the early hours of August 31, her body was discovered lying in Bucks Row, a quiet and poorly lit street. When investigators arrived, they found that her throat had been deeply cut. Upon closer examination, they also noticed severe mutilations to her abdomen. The brutality of the attack shocked the police officers and doctors who examined the body. At first, authorities believed the murder might have been another act of violence common in the rough streets of East London. However, the unusual injuries quickly suggested something far more disturbing. This crime would soon become the first in a series of murders that would terrorize the city and create one of the most infamous criminal legends in history.
Only 8 days after the murder of Mary Ann Nichols, another shocking crime occurred in the streets of Whitechapel. On the morning of September 8, 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered in the backyard of a house on Hanbury Street. Chapman was 47 years old and, like Nichols, lived in extreme poverty. She had been separated from her husband and struggled to find stable work. In order to survive, she often relied on casual labor and prostitution. On the night before her death, Chapman had been trying to earn enough money to pay for a bed in a local lodging house. A resident of the building discovered her body early in the morning. When the police arrived, they immediately noticed similarities to the previous murder. Chapman's throat had been cut deeply, but what shocked investigators even more was the condition of her abdomen. The killer had performed severe mutilations and had removed one of her internal organs. Doctors examining the scene believed the killer had worked quickly and with disturbing precision. This detail led investigators to speculate that the murderer might possess some knowledge of human anatomy. Some suspected he could be a butcher, surgeon, or medical student. News of the second murder spread rapidly across London. Newspapers began reporting on the possibility of a serial killer operating in Whitechapel. Fear began to spread among the population, and police realized they were now facing a far more serious and mysterious threat.
As the murders in Whitechapel continued to attract attention, Newspapers across London began competing to publish the most dramatic and shocking stories about the mysterious killer. The public was both terrified and fascinated. Every new detail about the investigation was printed in newspapers, spreading fear throughout the city. In late September 1888, an unusual letter arrived at the Central News Agency in London. The writer claimed to be responsible for the murders and mocked the police for their inability to capture him. The letter contained disturbing references to the crimes and suggested that the killer planned to continue his attacks. What made the letter truly unforgettable was the name signed at the bottom, Jack the Ripper. Soon after, the letter was published in newspapers. The name quickly spread throughout London and across the world. Although many historians believe the letter may have been written by journalists or hoaxers seeking publicity, the name captured the public imagination. Additional letters soon appeared, some claiming to be from the killer and others likely written by pranksters. One of the most disturbing messages, known as the From Hell letter, was even sent with part of a human kidney. Whether authentic or not, these letters intensified public panic. The mysterious murderer now had a name, and the legend of Jack the Ripper had officially begun. On the night of September 30th, 1888, the case of Jack the Ripper reached a terrifying new stage. Within a single night, 2 brutal murders occurred in different parts of Whitechapel. This night would later become known as the Double Event, one of the most shocking moments in the entire investigation. The first victim was Elizabeth Stride. Her body was discovered in a small yard near Berner Street. Like the previous victims, her throat had been cut. However, investigators noticed something unusual. Unlike the earlier murders, her body showed very little mutilation. This led police to believe that the killer may have been interrupted before he could continue the attack. Less than an hour later, another body was discovered only a short distance away. This victim was Catherine Eddowes. The condition of her body was far more horrific. She had been severely mutilated, and several organs had been removed with disturbing precision. The fact that 2 murders had occurred within such a short period of time shocked investigators and terrified the public. It showed that the killer was becoming increasingly bold and confident. Despite increased police patrols, the murderer had managed to escape again into the dark streets of Whitechapel. After the terrifying double event, fear spread rapidly across London. The people of Whitechapel were especially frightened. Residents were afraid to walk alone at night, and many believed the mysterious killer could strike again at any moment. Newspapers published daily updates about the investigation, often exaggerating details to attract readers and increase public anxiety. The police responded by dramatically increasing patrols throughout the Whitechapel district. Detectives questioned hundreds of potential witnesses and suspects. Neighborhood watch groups were formed by citizens who wanted to protect their streets. Despite these efforts, the investigation faced enormous challenges. In 1888, modern forensic science did not yet exist. There were no fingerprint databases, no DNA analysis, and crime scenes were often contaminated by crowds before investigators arrived. This made it extremely difficult for police to gather reliable evidence. Many theories about the killer began to circulate. Some investigators believed the murderer was a local resident who knew the streets well enough to escape quickly after each attack. Others suspected the killer might be a doctor, butcher, or someone familiar with anatomy because of the precise mutilations performed on the victims. Despite intense efforts by the police, the killer remained unidentified. The mystery of Jack the Ripper was growing deeper and more frightening. The final and most horrifying murder associated with Jack the Ripper occurred on November 9, 1888. The victim was Mary Jane Kelly, a young woman believed to be around 25 years old. Unlike the previous victims, Kelly lived in a small rented room in Whitechapel. On the night of her murder, Kelly had reportedly been seen drinking in local pubs and later returning to her room with a man. Early the next morning, when rent collectors attempted to contact her, there was no response. Concerned, the landlord eventually looked through the window of the room. What he saw was one of the most disturbing crime scenes in the history of Victorian London. Kelly's body had been brutally mutilated, far beyond the level seen in previous murders. Because the killer had committed the crime inside a private room rather than on the street, he had far more time to carry out the attack. Investigators believed the murderer may have remained in the room for a long period of time before escaping unnoticed. The brutality of the crime shocked even experienced police officers and doctors. Newspapers described it as the most horrifying murder in the entire series. Strangely, after this killing, the murders suddenly stopped. The mysterious killer who had terrorized London seemed to disappear as suddenly as he had appeared. After the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, something strange happened. The brutal killings that had terrified London suddenly stopped. No more victims matching the same pattern were discovered in Whitechapel. This sudden end only deepened the mystery surrounding Jack the Ripper. Police investigators continued searching for suspects, but the case became increasingly difficult. With limited evidence and unreliable witness reports, the investigation slowly lost momentum. Over time, authorities identified several possible suspects, though none could be proven guilty. One of the most discussed suspects was Aaron Kosminski. He lived in the Whitechapel area and was known to suffer from serious mental illness. Later, he was admitted to a psychiatric institution where he spent the rest of his life. Some investigators believed he matched certain witness descriptions, but there was never enough evidence to confirm he was the killer. Another frequently mentioned suspect was Montague John Druitt. Druitt was a lawyer and schoolteacher who died shortly after the final murder, apparently by suicide. Some officials suspected that his death might explain why the killings suddenly ended. Despite these theories, the true identity of the killer was never officially determined.
Even though the murders stopped in 1888, the legend of Jack the Ripper did not disappear. Instead, the mystery grew larger over time. The brutal crimes in Whitechapel became one of the most famous unsolved criminal cases in history. Newspapers had already played a huge role in spreading the story during the investigation. Sensational headlines and dramatic descriptions of the murders captured the public's attention. People across London and even around the world became fascinated with the identity of the unknown killer. Over the following decades, countless books, documentaries, and historical investigations attempted to solve the mystery. Historians and amateur detectives studied police reports, witness statements, and medical records from the time. Each generation of researchers proposed new suspects and new theories about the killer's identity. Some theories suggested the murderer was a doctor or surgeon because of the precise mutilations performed on the victims. Others believed the killer might have been a local butcher or slaughterhouse worker familiar with cutting techniques. More extreme theories even suggested members of the royal family or secret organizations were somehow involved, though these ideas are widely considered unlikely by historians. The mystery became so famous that it helped shape the modern image of the serial killer in popular culture.
More than a century after the murders, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. Despite advances in forensic science and the discovery of new historical documents, no theory has ever been proven with certainty. Historians and investigators continue to analyze the events that took place in Whitechapel during 1888. Police files, witness statements, and medical reports from the time have been carefully studied. Some researchers have even attempted to use modern forensic techniques to re-examine old evidence connected to the case. However, many important pieces of evidence were lost or poorly preserved, making it extremely difficult to reach a definitive conclusion. Because of this, the true identity of the killer may never be known. Today, the story of the Whitechapel murders continues to fascinate people around the world. Books, films, documentaries, and historical tours still explore the dark streets where the crimes occurred in London. The legend of Jack the Ripper survives not only because of the brutality of the crimes, but also because of the unanswered question that remains. Who was the mysterious killer who appeared in 1888, terrorized a city, and then vanished without a trace? And that question still echoes through history today.